And we're back. What's up, everybody? So, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Ben, asking him, what kind of content do you think people want to see? So this is Ben's great idea, is to talk about crabbing. And I was like, oh yeah, we should do that. Talk about, what to do, what kind of gear to use, and where to go, and the areas that, I crab, and kind of talk about the strategy I have and what depths and bait, what kind of traps to use. So he gave me a great idea, so let's go over that. Let's talk about gear. So my favorite method of crabbing, well, there's multiple methods. So first one is you can use rings, which is kind of like a basket that collapses on itself, so it lays flat on the bottom, and you can put bait in there in like a little cage or in a bag, and it sits on the bottom, and the crabs will kind of crawl into it, and then when you pull it up, the basket, the bottom ring part lifts up, and that's attached to like the rope harness, and that'll lift up, and the other ring of the basket it's more weighted, stays down, and that creates this like net basket looking thing, and all the crabs are stuck in that, and then you pull that up to the top. Or if you're on the bank, you can do it from the shore, you can do it off a pier or off a dock, and that's how you catch crab with a ring. But when you're fishing with traps, which is what these are, this is my preferred way of doing it. But when you're doing that, the crab will actually crawl into these openings right here. So when they crawl inside, they'll actually physically walk in right here and open this gate. This lays straight down, and then when they walk in, it pushes up, and then they're able to get into. So with these traps, what you want to do is have length of rope. You can use nylon rope that floats, and in the state of Oregon it has to sink, so you either have to attach a weight to it, or you got to use this stuff, which is leaded lined. I think there's also a sinking line that is not leaded that you can buy, but I've always used leaded line, and that works pretty good for me. These are 100-foot lengths. If you're just planning on crabbing in the bays, 100-foot might not be necessary, so you can go down to 50, or you can just buy a spool and cut them to whatever length you want. You can get them in spools of 500 feet up to 1,000 feet, and then just cut them at whatever length. I think these are the 5/8 inch size, or maybe no, they're not 5/8. I think these are 3/8 for the traps, and these do really well. I've never had a problem with the lines. You can also go with a harness if you want. You can attach a harness to, and that just pulls up on the corners of your trap, and I've enjoyed using these. This one's been pretty good. My other ones, they're kind of struggling, they're kind of rusting. This one, I think this is a Promar one, stainless steel, and it's been great. As you can see, there's no corrosion, no rust, but some of these other ones, like, I've had issues with corrosion, and you just want to be careful about that, because when these rust out, you don't want to lose a pot, because pots are expensive. But anyways, this pot right here, this is a Promar. Danielson also sells these. The reason why I like the Promars is they have this door on top that you can grab crab out of, and you can put your buoys in there and your lines, and then close it up, and that's pretty easy for storage. With Danielson's, you have to actually take apart the sides, and that can get kind of obnoxious. So anyways, and then I like to put the bait bags kind of in the middle, so that they're kind of suspended right here, and that way their crabs can easily come in and go. Full of crab, and there's keepers in there.
Oh yeah,
but this is a smaller one. This is like a 24 by 24. I've actually done really well on these smaller ones. The bigger ones work as well, but the smaller ones seem to be the best for when I go for my application. So bought these specifically for the ocean this year, and they've been pretty good. These are made by Fishfield, and they're just a little sturdier. They're heavier, so you don't have to worry about them moving around on the bottom. These little Promars and the Danielsons, they're not as heavy. They're kind of a thinner gauge wire, and they can get pushed around in the current. It's just got the same kind of system, these gates that the crab come in, and it's also got a door on top that you can open up here and put your lines in. And so yeah, that's kind of what I do for traps. I like to use 2 buoys on mine. Some people use 1, some people use 3, some people use ones with flags. Just get ones where you know your color combinations, and I just use a lime green stripe on mine. Most people don't have that color on theirs, and so I know those are mine, and I always put my name on my buoys. I think that's required now in Oregon. You have to have some sort of identification, and yeah, that's how you keep track of them. So I'll also kind of talk about like where I like to go. I primarily crab either in the Nehalem area or the Tillamook area, and that's in either the bays or the ocean. The bays are more set up kind of like if you want to take a family, or if you want to take friends that haven't really gone, or if you just want to go out on an easy day. Usually the water in a bay is a lot calmer, a lot easier to work with, and you don't need as big of a boat. When you start crabbing in the ocean, you kind of want something that's a little bit bigger. My boat is only 20 feet, which is kind of on the smaller side of things for boats, but it does pretty well, and I like it, and it works for me. But if you wanted to crab in a bay, anything from a 12-foot aluminum, Gregor boat, all the way up to, some big, huge fishing boat, you can do that in a bay. It's pretty simple. If you want to go have a fun family day, the bay is the way to go. This is the Nehalem Bay, and over here is where I like to launch out of, which is the state park ramp. So if we kind of zoom in here, so this is where the state park launches at, and the state park's kind of up in this area. But I launch out of there, and then I head south towards the ocean, and there's a lot of little spots along here in the channel that I like to set my crab gear in. Most of these areas are usually between 12 and 20 feet of water for the depth, and if you don't have a fish finder, you can also go on these like charts, and you can kind of see where the channel's at. For the most part, this is where the channel is always going to be, is on this side, and you'll see the channel markers out there. They're red and green, and so I kind of lay my traps along there, and so there's all these points, and I'm kind of looking for more of that 15-foot or more depth to place my pots in. I don't know if it's anecdotal, but for me, I just like that deeper water. So I think those crab just kind of hang out in those deeper pools, and you'll kind of find them. So on your fish finder, you'll kind of see where it goes from like 10, 11, 12, and all of a sudden it drops 15, 17, 18, 19 feet. That's where I like to drop them, because they're like these little spots on the bottom where I think the crab kind of concentrate, and I do pretty well there. So here's the Kelly's rental area where you can rent crabbing boats and stuff. It's basically just straight across from there, that whole channel area. This is primarily where all the rental guys go, where they're renting and putting pots, and I think this is where Kelly's tells them to go, and that's pretty productive. But I like somewhere back in here as well, so going a little further back, kind of away from the crowd. I do pretty well along here because it's pretty deep, and that channel just runs all the way through here. It kind of shallows up a little bit in here in this middle area, and so I'll come also out here to where the jetty rental spot is, and that I'll lay my pots down in that deeper water. That's that 20-30 feet of water, and we have done pretty well in there. Some days, not so much. I don't know why, but we seem to always catch a lot more females over there. But when you do get the males, they're the really big ones because I think they just come right in from the salt. And then you can see out here, that's the ocean. So this track actually, right here, this is a fresh track. This is me. I was out there last night, and this is where we set our crab pots at. And we were getting crab, and I took people out just to check out the ocean, kind of show them what it looks like out there, which is kind of fun. And yeah, so since this is up and fresh, I can kind of tell you what was going on. So yesterday, low tide was at noon, basically. And so we left my place around 1 o'clock. And I like to show up once the tide has already turned, and you got like a couple hours of it coming in. So we got there around 2:30, almost 3 o'clock. So we're right about in that area. So the tide's about about halfway, maybe a little less coming in. And so that's when the water, you can start seeing push in towards like where the state ramp is at, where you launched. And so I like to start right about then, because that's when the crab are pretty much moving around, and you can start to target different areas where they're at. And then the peak last night was around 6:40, 6:30ish, that time. This is Brighton, so that's kind of like right where we were at. And so yeah, so that's when we had a high tide. And so once that water kind of slid in for a little while, I started back here. So this is where, you know, we left the ramp, and then we came up here, and I put one pot there. I put several others right here. I took 7. You can have 3 pots per person, and we had a pretty big party. But when I crab in the bay, I like to take a lot of pots as opposed to the ocean. When you're in the ocean, you don't need as many. 3 pots is probably enough. It's because there's a lot more crab out there. But in the bay, it's a little different, and so you're going to want to, if you can, try to bring more pots. Like I was saying, 3 per person. So if you got multiple people crabbing, you should bring as many as you can, because you're trying to cover an area and trying to figure out where the big males are kind of concentrated, and then you can kind of pinpoint that area, and then you can kind of set all your pots there and kind of keep people out away from you, but also hone in on those schools of crab. So anyways, I placed a lot of my pots around here. Initially we weren't getting much luck, so it was pretty slow. So I grabbed these pots and I started moving them a little forward, and I didn't mark them each time. This is like the first markings that I put when I first laid them down. So I was kind of moving these a little forward because I'm kind of just trying to get closer to the salt, seeing if those crab are more towards the salt or more back into the bay. And since I wasn't catching many that were back in the bay, I just was like, all right, let's move them closer to the ocean. So we started moving them closer, but then we caught a couple keepers. And so I thought, all right, I'll just keep a couple back here. So I kept a couple back here, but then I moved a bunch of them up here around the corner, and those weren't hitting as well. So we were getting a lot of females, no keepers. So I was like, all right, we gotta just keep going closer to the salt. So eventually we ended up out here by the jetty rental in that deeper water, and that's where we found our keepers. So we ended up getting just over 1 limit of crab. We had a whole bunch of people, but we didn't need a lot of crab. We just wanted to more or less just go out for the day and just have fun. We weren't out there to try to get keepers for everyone full limits. We just wanted enough for a crab boil. So we went from catching 2 crab up here to catching about 10 more down here, just in a matter of setting them down for about an hour. So that was pretty good. We spent most of our time on the water. We were on the water from, like I was saying, 2:30, 3 o'clock till about 6:30, 7 o'clock. So about 4-ish hours on the water. And we would let these pots sit in an area for about an hour, and then we would move them. And when you're crabbing in the bay, you kind of want to rotate your gear as much as you can so that those crab, the smaller ones, don't eat all your bait. And then if you're not catching anything, you can move it to an area that is going to have keepers. So anyways, that's how our day went. And then we came back to the launch, and then we did a little crab cook-off right at the they got picnic benches and stuff, little family area. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Alright. Throw it out there.
See, I want to feed them.
Oh, gross.
Should I throw it out there?
I think you should throw that one.
We feed the seagulls.
Nice job.